ANA proves time and again that trips don't need to be stressful cattle calls. Join me for this full trip report of my flight from Saigon to Tokyo Narita in ANA's business class, coming up. No matter where I'm flying, but especially when going on a long trip, I really try to avoid early morning flights like the plague. But these days, especially from Saigon, flights are few and far in between compared to pre-pandemic times. So, a 5 a.m. taxi to the airport was in order. My flight today, NH834, was the first flight of the day, not counting for the overnight flights. So it seemed to have quite a crowd outside, but inside was a different story. The check-in desks were pretty busy, relatively speaking, but the business class line was wide open as is expected on a feeder flight like this one. In case you're unfamiliar, until January, there were no passenger flights, commercial passenger flights that is, into Vietnam. But there have been commercial flights leaving Vietnam throughout the pandemic. Today's flight, in late February 2022, is at a time when things are just starting to pick up again in Vietnam. As of this flight date, there were commercial flights scheduled with around 15 countries, with the doors ready to be swung wide open sometime in March, most likely before this video is published. I was pleasantly surprised when the check-in agent informed me that I could access the Les Saigonais lounge. I'd honestly expected all of the lounges to still be closed, or at least be closed at this early hour. Seems I was the first traveler of the day, as they were still putting on the lights as I entered. This, along with the Vietnam Airlines lounge, are the two better options as far as lounges go in Saigon. This lounge is meant to be an ode to Saigon with many traditional ao dai dresses on the display, and various references to the non la, the famous conical Vietnamese hat throughout. All food offerings were prepared, or at least heated, to order, and there was a variety of drinks on offer too. In terms of food and drink, this is bog standard fare for international airports in Vietnam. To my knowledge, almost all lounges in the country are essentially run by the same entity, so you're always going to get this same lackluster offering. At least though, they're consistent. The Saigonais lounge provides some of the best views of the apron though, compared to the Orchid or the Rose lounge especially, which are on lower levels. Just in front of us today was our 787-9, parked next to Vietjet's first ever wide-body aircraft actually, an A330. This flight today was originally scheduled on a regional configuration 787-8, with angle flat seats in a 222 pattern. So the upgrade to their long-haul product in the Dash 9 was a very welcome surprise. We were at Gate 17 today, and I was surprised to see how full the waiting area was, considering how quiet all the corridors were. Plane spotting in Saigon is not exactly what it used to be, but we do still get plenty of cargo jets and some military aircraft. Plus we have the beautiful Vietnam Airlines A350, one of the best looking aircraft out there in my opinion. Just in from its new route to San Francisco, the first ever regularly scheduled commercial flight between Vietnam and the US. Boarding began right on time and I was quickly stepping on board this less than 2-year-old Dreamliner. The interior is fresh and calming, if not a bit sterile. Let's get into the best and the worst seats. Of their sizable fleet of all three 787 variants, this Dash 9 configuration is the most premium heavy, with 48 lie-flat seats in business, 21 in premium economy, and 146 in economy. Business class is in a staggered 1-to-1 configuration, and perhaps more so than all other airlines, you really need to pay attention to the seat rows and numbers when you're selecting your seats for two big reasons. With most airlines with this style of seating, you can generalize that, for example, all even rows are true window seats, whereas all odd rows are closer to the aisle. ANA has instead alternated the seats differently so that the same can't be said here. Secondly, Most airlines would consider all seats on the left near the windows, for example, A seats or Alpha. On ANA, Alpha seats are closer to the window and Charlie seats are closer to the aisle. Overall, it's a great product, but the seats to avoid are for sure 7 Delta, 7 Hotel, and 8 Hotel. These 3 seats are all on the aisle side in really high traffic areas. That said, 8 Hotel is a fantastic seat if you have an infant in a bassinet. It's totally hidden from the aisle, and the extra room afforded to the bulkhead seat really proves useful. Besides that, I'd personally avoid all of the aisle seats throughout the cabin. I'm just outlining some of them here so that the entire cabin doesn't look like a caution zone. For this flight though, I was very happily in 4 Kilo, a true window seat in the middle of the forward cabin. I was one of just 5 passengers in business class today, along with 2 pilots deadheading back to Narita. Seat 1 Hotel also has a massive amount of personal private space. In general, I don't think these seats get enough credit. They're really comfortable and a lot more spacious than many other seats manufactured in the same staggered lie-flat style. Each seat was stocked with a large pillow, a blanket, slippers, and a headphone set. It's not over the top like The Room, ANA's new flagship business class product, but it's a solid offering which I'd have no problem spending 15 hours in. While I do love how spacious the seat feels, I wish there was a bit more storage on the side table. Just a small cubby or a portion of the table with a lip around it just to prevent things from rolling around. There's a personal reading light, a basic remote for the IFE, and very simplistic seat controls which are not easily accidentally pushed. The headphones were nothing to write home about, but they did the job. As is standard on just about any Japanese carrier, slippers and a small shoe bag were also provided. The pillow was fluffy but firm enough for support, and I loved the duvet, which in addition to being plush and cozy, also folded into itself to make a neat little package. Little touches like this are, I think, what helps Japanese carriers always stand out as a very polished operation. The seat is surprisingly private as well, especially when leaning back or lying down. The foot cubby is deceptively deep and offers plenty of length and height when laying down. If I could change one thing, I'd prefer that the window side armrest could actually be lowered for more arm and shoulder room when lying down. Juice, water, and sparkling wine were brought around on a tray in plastic cups prior to departure. Pushback was 14 minutes late, but we still landed plenty early enough. Our taxi included a ride past Vietnam's scrappiest airline, Pacific Airlines, the product of Qantas and Vietnam Airlines dissolving their Jetstar Pacific joint venture. Some truly stunning liveries they've got going on here. Today, we'd be taking off to the west before looping around to head east and then up north to Tokyo. As always, I'll just let you enjoy the spool up and roll up. Today's flight took off from Saigon's runway 25 left, up to a maximum altitude of 41,000 feet for this 2,272-mile trip landing on Tokyo Narita's runway 34 left. Shortly after takeoff, water bottles were passed out to hold us over while the quick meal service was being prepared. The IFE on ANA is good, but not fantastic. The functionality is top-notch, but the selection of movies and TV shows is just okay. Legroom is much better than okay though. For reference, I'm 6 foot. The tray table is easily released from the side table and provides a surprisingly sturdy work surface. While the table itself isn't huge, when you consider the big table on the side, I was able to spread out and work pretty well on this flight. And by work, I mean watch movies and film clouds. We were provided with full paper menus, which during these times, especially on shorter flights like this one, have become the exception. Feel free to pause the video to take a look at each page. This particular menu was for 4 different flights, Saigon to and from both Haneda and Narita. I've included all of the drinks and the food specifically for this flight. Service started off with the drink service, which included some seasoned rice crackers. I pre-ordered my Japanese meal online beforehand. The pre-order feature simply allows you to pre-select a Japanese style or a Western style meal. Since I knew business class was almost empty, I was worried that if I'd be the only Western passenger on the flight, maybe they'd load just a Western meal for me. When the very friendly flight attendant came around to take drink orders, she confirmed my pre-order and set the table for me. The meal was served on a single tray and was immaculately presented, with the flight attendant briefly pointing out and describing each of the 4 zensai along with the soy sauce seafood dish, served with perfectly cooked rice on the side. All of the food, except for the miso soup maybe, was seasoned really well and delicious. For a relatively short flight, I really appreciate the detailed presentation. After breakfast, coffee, tea, and dessert were offered, and I went with an iced green tea. The crew made it clear before takeoff that due to COVID regulations, the forward restroom was reserved for only crew, which was absolutely fine and left 2 others for us to use in the business class cabin. Granted, there were only 5 of us, but the bathrooms were kept spotlessly clean throughout the flight. I always appreciate a window in the bathroom, and of course ANA also outfits their toilets with bidet functions. A little bit later on, after I decided to go all in on staying awake, the flight attendant proactively brought me the dessert that I skipped prior with my 3rd cup of coffee. If you prefer this beautiful engine view, by the way, make sure to select row 8 or 9. Around an hour prior to arrival, the flight attendant and purser both individually brought me some postcards. I suppose having seen me take photos of everything on board, which was a very, very sweet touch. Service in general was absolutely as good as it gets for a flight of this length. My cup was always full, and my tray was never left empty for more than a moment. All of this without ever feeling like they were hovering. Before landing, I ordered a bowl of udon from the snack menu, which also hit the spot. Checking out our shadow on the very fluffy clouds, we were quickly approaching the Tokyo metro area, and the crew were performing their final checks. Today's approach brought us straight into Narita. Today I was connecting onto a United flight, but had Tokyo been my final destination, I certainly would have chosen to fly into Haneda, which is much more convenient to the city center. Soon enough, we were on short final, flying over the coastline and around 15 miles of farmland on this beautiful and crisp February afternoon. After a fairly long taxi, which took us past some very welcome sights, such as the ANA A380s, we arrived at our gate 37 minutes ahead of schedule. Alright, time to get into the flip-flop score. The seat is just about as good as you'll ever find on a flight of this length and in pristine condition. The service on the ground was great, but in the air, just perfect at a 10. The lounge, relatively speaking, is very good at a 9. One weaker point for ANA is their website, which feels a bit clunky at times. Cleanliness and the selection of food and drink both get full 10s, with taste, entertainment, and amenities coming in with 9s. Overall, a really pleasant 92 out of 100. I think ANA is one of Asia's more underrated airlines, and I look really forward to my upcoming flight with them from JFK to Narita in May in their new first-class cabin. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for 2 new flight or hotel reviews every week. See you next time on United Airlines Flight 33 from Narita to LAX.